Good evening, everyone. Tonight is a work session of the South Kingstown Planning Board. The date is June 9th, 2026. First item on the agenda is roll call. Susan Axelrod.
Here.
Caper Wilson.
Here.
Liz Carp. Here. Robin Pothier. Armand Monaco. Here. Paul Jordan.
Here.
And Maria Mack is here. Our first agenda item is a recommendation to the Town Council, zoning map and text amendment, the Peacedale Preserve Special Management District. Jamie, would you like to give us an overview prior to the applicant coming forward?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a brief introductory before we get into that agenda item. I'd like to welcome our newest principal planner, Curtis Dufour. Curtis hails from North Carolina via Boston to Providence and then to us in South Kingstown. So we're very happy to have him on board as a principal planner, and I think he'll be a good asset to both the department and the town.
I'm sure he will. Welcome, Curtis.
So, Madam Chair, as you mentioned, as an agenda item, you have a zoning map and text amendment associated with the Peacedale Preserve with a terminology of Special Management District. We have the applicant's representatives here, both legal, I believe engineering, as well as planning, and two of the partners are also here from that facility. So again, it is a proposed text amendment, map amendment. We have done the legal notices as well as the notifications. You have a staff memo. We did conclude with some favorable findings as well as some language of any conditions. Understanding this is the first night that the planning board is seeing this, that the applicant will present all of the details associated with it. There may be some concerns by planning board members about the specifics of the language and whether you feel, if you feel favorable as it relates to this potential change, do you feel there are sufficient standards within the regs to have the applicant deliver a product that he may be showing you this evening? So again, I have confidence that the applicant will be addressing some of the issues you may have tonight. They will go through their presentation. And again, my expectations as the planning director is you may not act on this tonight. Again, you're seeing this for the first time. You may want our staff to look at the application again, look at the language contained in the proposed text amendment, work with our legal counsel as well as their legal counsel if you're suggesting any potential changes to that, if you're looking to act in any favorable manner.
Thanks,
Again,
Jamie.
you're acting in a favorable manner to make a recommendation to council. Ultimately, the map change and the text amendment has to go to town council with a public hearing.
So to that end, Jamie, I was going to ask you, according to the memo, the recommendation is required on or before Friday, June 26th. Today is the 9th, so that is not a lot of time for us having kind of this first iteration.
Again, my understanding in conversations with the applicant's representative is they are more than willing to work on the timeframes associated with action.
Okay.
And again, if I misspoke, I'm sure Mr. Doherty will add to that.
Thanks. Is there anyone representing the applicant? Can you make sure your mic is on? He's doing that.
Yeah, I was just doing that. I'm sorry. I am legal counsel for this proposed zone amendment and zoning map change. I'd like to say, first off, back in November, we had originally quickly filed an application which we withdrew. And it was a very, very broad application because we were rushing things together to try and take advantage of some solar credits that were expiring. We, after multiple discussions with planning and in particular Mr. Rabbit, we thought it best, and I think he advised us that it would be best to completely withdraw that and come up with something a little bit more comprehensive that gives you an idea as to what the vision is for this property and the bases behind the zoning text that we're proposing as well as the zoning map amendment. What I can say as well, We're not here on a project right now tonight. It's just for the text amendment and the zoning map amendment. But in order to give you a flavor for why we are proposing this, we have also put a lot of detail into things that would ordinarily be presented for a specific project. And what I can tell you that is, if we do receive a favorable review and the town council sees fit to pass this, we will be back many times before this board. We will be back for development plan review. We'll be back for there are a number of other triggering things in the subdivision and planning regulations that are existent that are not being superseded so much from this particular zoning text amendment. And I assure you that each and every time we'll probably be before the technical review committee. We'll be back before planning for master plan, preliminary and final approvals to proceed forward with the various stages of development of the property. But to give you an idea as to where we are going, we gave you a little bit more, some elevations to look at. And one of the things that I would like to say from the outset, too, is it's a pleasure to be working with the applicant on this, because it's really destined to be a very top-shelf development with the finest attention to detail, and looking for something that's more akin to being a gem in the town rather than a nuisance or just some kind of spot like, the unintended consequences of, say, for instance, Boone Street Market in Narragansett. So I would like to say that we're not afraid of enhancing some of the language in the proposed text amendment to ensure that certain architectural standards would be adhered to. We have no problem whatsoever with doing that, because we intend to do that, and it's not something that we would be cheapening out on by any stretch of the imagination. So I'd just like to say that today here, to give you an idea as to what the overall vision is and why we're seeking this and why we think this is a good thing in the town, I have 3 witnesses in particular, and I also have Bradley Waugh here as well, if you'd like to hear from one of the major principals, as well as Eric Zwena. I have, first off, Edward Pimentel from Pimentel Consulting, who will be addressing the zoning and planning issues with respect to this, and also explaining why the zoning text amendment was put together in the manner and the language that it came to fruition in. Second on that, we would have Eric Zwena, who is an architect, a rather fine architect, who has prepared elevations and a little bit of design materials for the project to give you an idea of where we're going. And these really are not, pie in the sky, oh, we're going to show you the greatest thing in the world and then, come up with an economy project. That's not the intent whatsoever, and we're not afraid of anything in there to be placed in if you see fit to choose to amend what we have proposed and make it as a recommendation to the town council. Finally, we also have Molly Titus, who's an engineer from Dupree Engineering, who will be addressing the layout, the engineering attention to detail, and some of the environmental concerns that we wanted to work around to ensure that this project is not going to be a hindrance and that it'll fit in and it won't have any negative impacts on the surrounding properties. And again, that's just what we're doing here as a presentation tonight to give you an idea. If this goes through the town council, we will be back here on multiple occasions, and you'll have many opportunities to vet projects in the stages of development at master, preliminary, and final plan as well. And if you don't, in order to not duplicate time and spitting out a lot of things that I know my witnesses are going to have in the presentation, and unless you have some direct questions for me right now, I'd like to turn it over to give you a fluid presentation.
Yes, and before you do that, I have a question for legal counsel. Andy, can you explain to the board how they need to consider this request despite the fact that there are going to be plans that are being shown that may or may not come to fruition, and how those plans should or should not impact the discussion tonight? Just so everyone's clear.
Yes, I mean, what they're doing is going above and beyond what is required as far as showing you plans. But unless And I wouldn't, and it's at least it's not set out that way in the current ordinance, that these are the plans that are being approved as part of the zone change. They should realize that. It may not be things, the basic uses and so forth are being set forth in the proposed zone change. But it's not like you're doing an old-fashioned planned unit development, nor is it a land development project where it would be coming to you first in that aspect. So it is a zone change. So there may well be changes in flexibility. So you have to look at the overall possibility of how these things will be developed and not the specifics in front of you, although obviously you can judge that as to how you think it might, give it what weight you want.
Conditions can be put on a zone change, correct?
Conditions can be put on a zone change, such as, I mean, they've shown various site plans. If you wanted to limit it to a particular site plan, yes. I don't think you can put a condition on that says, that's what we want. It's got to look like that. Unless they're willing to come in and support that, which I think we just heard a disclaimer from that effect. They're showing you ideas,
Right.
Rough ideas at the beginning, other properties and how it might look here. So there's a limit to what you can put on in conditions.
Great, thank you.
Madam Chair, one thing I'd also like to point out too is that we've researched this and gotten our partners lined up to develop this and to make this come to fruition. There's adequate capital to do every single thing that we're showing you on these plans, and we intend to make this the minimum that we're going to do. However, with regard to comments of council on site plans, I would like just a little leeway. If you choose to make a condition, I would like it not to be strict compliance, because as you know, this is an initial scope of the project, and we haven't dug in and done the required detailed engineering that every project has to go through. So we don't know specifically if there's going to be something that could alter that. So if you could leave strict compliance out, I would appreciate it, because I know that a number of projects all around the state have run into issues with that wording. And again, we like the layout that we have, and that's the way we would like to pursue it. But that being said, if you could take that consideration into your thoughts and your deliberations.
Certainly.
Thank you.
Thanks. Please continue.
All right, I'd like to call up Edward Pimentel to give a little overview of what went into the drafting of this and the rationale behind it. So Ed, will you please identify yourself and give just a recitation of your, although you've been before this board on many occasions.
I have. Edward Pimentel, for the record. That's P as in Paul, Imentel. This actually is a good segue into this development project. Obviously, Mr. Brad Waugh, the property owner, and other entities had a vision, and they wanted to bring this vision forward to the planning board. But at the same time, we understood going in that we wanted to see how can we craft this vision in an ordinance form so that the board and ultimately the council can feel comfortable that what is being proposed is what is going to be built. So it's been a collaborative effort with staff back and forth. How do we, first of all, kept the minimalist approach to the uses. We knew we wanted to make this more recreational, some guest cabins, things that work in conjunction with one another. No scientific studies were done, but there were some market studies done for all these uses, especially the upscale flex storage units and the need for additional. This isn't going to be a traditional motel. That's why I had to put it and pigeonhole it under that land use, but these really are guest cabins, guest cottages. So we took a minimalist approach on land usage. We also wanted the board to feel confident that we were not going to consume the land resources, albeit a 122-acre site. We want to preserve the majority of the site. It's historically been used for a variety of uses, non-residential. And in the future, maybe it will be appropriate for residential development, which would vacate the other uses that have historically been on the property. But we wanted this board, and then ultimately the council, to know that we were really consolidating these uses to an area surrounding what is already being used commercially, well, non-residentially, area that's already disturbed. For example, the area there to the bottom is where we're talking about putting the flex storage units. As Attorney Doherty says, we haven't done the engineering, but we are thinking outside the box. We're trying to preserve the forest there to the extent we can for buffering purposes, for open space purposes. We consolidated everything to the south where there's non-residential uses, where there's non-residential zoning classifications or zoning districts. There's industrial across, there's a government institution just south of us. So we took that vision first and then worked our way back into an ordinance. For example, what is going to be the size of the structures? Let's make sure the board feels confident that these aren't open-ended uses, right? So we didn't think just the simple dimensional standards, setbacks, off-street parking. We got into the intensity of the uses. We got into the separation from one another, right? Working closely with our design team, who are going to speak eloquently to this project, the architects and the engineers. How do we craft this in an ordinance form so that the board says, okay, we see that they're trying to build a vision and that this vision must be followed, regardless of who pursues this vision. We believe we're going to be building it, but one thing, working with staff, things change, and somebody else doesn't come along and says, hey, I've got an ordinance, gotcha, I can work with this and I can do as I please. That wasn't the intent here. We hope to get to a situation with this board, because we want a positive recommendation, and then ultimately an approval from the council, that you feel confident that when we say we're going to do something, we're going to do it, and it's crafted into the ordinance such that it has to be done. And that really was the intent here when we were crafting this. We can go through the specific uses if you want, or the intensity of uses. Obviously, these are things we can work with the board, personally, directly, or through staff, however you want to do it. But ultimately, we want you to feel confident that we're not just spewing an idea. We really want to bring this to fruition. And that really was what we've been working on for the last 4 months, back and forth. I think I've gone through a half a dozen iterations of this ordinance, adding more meat, taking stuff out, adding meat, taking stuff out, and working around the vision of what you see here. I don't know if the board has any questions.
Thank you. Most likely, the most efficient way to do this would be to have your team give the presentation, and then we will ask questions.
Understood. Thank you.
Thanks.
Madam Chair, with that, I'd like to bring up Eric Zwena to give you a recitation of what the vision is supposed to be from an architectural perspective.
Thank you, Patrick. Eric Zweta, Managing Principal of ZDS Architecture and Interiors, offices in Providence, Rhode Island, and Washington, D.C. I'm not sure who's driving the present. Hi, thank you. Next slide, please. Okay, so we're starting off.
I just want to make sure that the screen is adjusted so that the folks in the audience can, everybody see this? Okay.
All right. So I don't want to repeat anything that was said by Patrick or Ed, but I will kick off by stating that it has been a refreshing collaboration with staff, and it's a pleasure to be in front of you, Madam Chair, and this board, to walk you through the vision for this project. Generally speaking, the idea here is not to expand the shooting use of this property. Instead, it's to modestly diversify the use of the property while making sure that we anchor all that diverse use to the south of the site to preserve the 100+ acres that are here. And we're using these structures as a way to buffer from residential neighbors, but we're really, the vision for the project is to provide amenities and housing to people who want to extend their stay and do things other than shooting. So that is what started the discussions about the property, and spent a lot of time with ownership to identify what those uses should be. I have, as an owner of a design firm, have worked at other shooting ranges to do this exact exercise that have been executed and built. And again, very refreshing to work with Brad and his team about how modest we wanted to be with this expansion. So when you look at this site plan, there are basically 3 nodes of development that we'll be speaking of that all sort of work off of the existing entry up to the property and the existing road that is paved on property today. On the top center of the page, that's a little bit grayed out, are the existing structures that are there today. And that the structures that are more bold, starting from the left, are 5 cabin structures on the left-hand side that have 4 keys per structure. On the bottom center is our clubhouse, which is about a 15,000 square foot footprint, and I'll get into the uses in that structure. And on the right-hand side, just above to the right, is our phase 1 of the flex storage units. That is, there's 10 units there. And then we've broken up the balance of those flex storage units on the right into 3 phases of work. So you have 20 units in each of those. There's 6 structures in total that you see. They're all 120 by 140 feet. And they're broken up into 2 structures just to break down the massing, which I'll show you some images for. And they're broken down into 3 phases of work. And how fast those 3 phases or how sequential or contiguous that construction is yet to be determined. Next slide, please. So as we're moving to the next slide, I just want to talk a little bit about the experience that we want to see here. We want this to be a campus-like experience. We want people to spend the night. We are hoping for a temporary tent structure on the left of the clubhouse, which you see in this rendering. I'm sorry, I'll give Brian just another second. There we go. Great. So this is just an aerial perspective of the site plan that we were just looking at. So you should still be relatively oriented to what's here. You could see grayed out again the top center of the image of the existing structures that are there today. And the existing structures, for those of you who haven't attended or visited the facility, it's a limited retail space with a small gathering area on the left-hand side, and then there's the range behind it. Again, all these new structures are not anything, specifically related to shooting or more of what's there. Instead, it's a diversification of uses. So you're seeing the cabins that are peppered along that entryway that is paved there today, the clubhouse in the bottom center, and then a couple of cabins to the right of that, and the self-storage on the right. You'll see, too, that in this aerial shot, and we'll get to see other images of this, but these storage, upscale flex storage facilities are not your standard industrial park sort of structures. These are highly sensitive to existing architecture in the community. They're very colonial in nature. We broke down the scale of them as best we could so they're not overpowering on the site. And they are isolated over to the right, so there is a little bit of separation between pedestrians and golf carts moving through the campus versus the vehicles and boat trailers and things of that nature that will be moving towards the upscale storage units on the right-hand side. The concept, if we go to the next slide, I think we'll get into some of the planning and maybe some of the imagery. Maybe the other direction. This is just a breakdown. I'll talk you through those square footages, but we can go to the next slide. Here, thank you very much. So, it's already been said. We're trying our best to thread the needle. We obviously anticipate and expect a great collaboration with this board to make sure that we get this just right and to fine-tune this architecture to be something that we're all very proud of. But we were also asked to sort of take a leap forward and to make sure that we are thinking through the details of the structures and that we're doing things in a very appropriate way. So my team did some research. Again, we've done other facilities like this, none in South Kingstown, so obviously very specific to this community. On the top left-hand corner is just an abstract photo of what the clubhouse could look like, but this rendering in front of us on an easel that you'll see later in this presentation is, from our standpoint, exactly what the structure should look like. We really want it to have this masonry base. We want it to be we want to celebrate the architectural details of the structure. We want to leverage the board and batten panelized siding. We want to make sure we do a standing seam roof to accent the structure. We want there to be sort of we want to dissolve the interior versus exterior experience. We want this to be continuous from when you approach the property right into a guest room or cabin or into the retail space of the range. This needs to be very continuous, a continuous experience from start to finish. Not for a shooter today, but for a wife of a shooter or a child of a shooter or a bride or a groom. You know, these concepts are things that we think really can be dictated by design. And so we have spent quite a bit of time thinking about the details of what these structures should look like. On the bottom left-hand corner is an example of what this temporary tent could be, and on the bottom right-hand corner are just some abstract inspirational images of architectural details that we think can be folded into this structure. The top right there is a retention pond, which we think could certainly be landscaped in a way that was more desirable and appreciated by all visitors to the property. This might be a little bit more southern or a little bit less northern feeling, but you'll see in the site plan that there's a pretty good hardscape and design around that moment on this campus. Next slide, please. Again, these are inspirational images of the upscale storage units. We're spending good time and dollars here to make sure that this is done really, really well. We anticipate that there will be buyers that would want more than one bay of these units. So the bays are 28 feet wide by 70 feet long, which gives you that 140 by 120 total footprint. There are 10 units currently in each footprint. However, it is very possible that people are buying multiple bays and they would want those units combined for a larger car collection or maybe cars and boats. And so we're structuring this to be more clear span, so we have that flexibility through the sales of these units. But again, these images do depict a very sensitive style of architecture, one that we think is very relevant in this community and ones that we think would be very desirable for a buyer. Next slide, please. So we'll get into the weeds a little bit on the actual clubhouse because this is sort of the heat signal on the property that we think is going to not only celebrate existing uses, but also introduce new uses that we think are very valuable to the property. We want to make sure that we're providing a wellness component. So this is the first floor upon entry. So you walk into a lobby lounge with a lounge space in sort of a rotunda feeling top left corner. There's also, when we want to make sure we don't overstaff this because we want to make sure that it's being managed properly. So when you have people spending a night and lights are off, kitchens are closed, we want people to have an opportunity to still grab and go something quick, snacks, sodas, and drinks. So in the top right-hand corner, you'll see that there's a large vestibule. I'm sorry, it's a sketch form now, but that would be accessible 24 hours a day. So when there are people who are spending the night or they may be making the turn, shooting on the range, they can go into that vestibule, go to some high-end vending opportunity, get a snack, and go back to their cabin or back to whatever they were doing. But there will be opportunities for people to gather in this space. So you'll see that there's a bar, there's a small cigar lounge behind it, there are some vintage arcade games. There's a kitchen that would be in the bottom center of the space. That kitchen would act as a finishing kitchen to support not only the people that are inside the building, but also to support a venue that could be happening out on the left there. You'll see that that white box on the left-hand side of the property. That would be a hardscaped paving system that would provide a great opportunity for a temporary tent. On the bottom right-hand corner is a pickleball courts. There are 2 pickleball courts, and those are accessed from above. But before we go upstairs, I just want to also point out that we have golf simulation and other amenities that we think our visitors and guests would really appreciate. Next slide, please. And that's about a 15,000 square foot footprint. As you go upstairs, now this is sort of the wellness component. So we have a beautiful 1,700 square foot fitness center that has men's and women's locker rooms. Those locker rooms would be appointed with sauna and steam and showers and bathrooms, et cetera. And then you have the opportunity to walk down into the pickleball courts from the upper floor. And that's to keep the massing of the structure down, but provide the head height that we need for those pickleball courts to be successful. Next slide. And so I mentioned a bride and groom earlier. You know, we see that could be a great place for small weddings or small company retreats. And maybe all the cabins don't need to be used, but this would be sort of the epicenter of a bridal party or some sort of executive group that wanted to utilize these 6 guest room units on the upper floor that have this common area in the center. Each of these guest rooms are approximately, they range from 400 square feet up to about 850 square feet. So those of you who are familiar with a standard hotel rooms are about 350 to 400 square feet. These are a little bit bigger units, more suite type unit styles to provide some space and a comfortable living environment for each of those 6 rooms. Next slide, please. This is just a rendering, which is also up on the easel, and this is what we think that structure would look like. So you'll see how the building is dissolving as it moves up into the 3rd floor. We're using dormers and clapboard to sort of fold this into the community in the appropriate way. Lots of masonry, lots of exposed structural elements that will just warm up the experience. And you'll see this grand arrival in the front. We're showing golf carts, but obviously that would be designed to accommodate vehicles as well. This is just a exploration about what the cabins could be. The goal is to allow a lot of flexibility here when you have families or people who want to inhabit a space at one time. We want to make sure there's plenty of a joinability. I'm not sure if that's a word, but the ability to connect multiple units under one roof to create a larger living experience. So on the left-hand side is the 1st floor. That is half of the cabin. So you'll see that double door to the right of that plan on the left. That's the beginning of the other half of the unit. So there's a kitchen, living room space on the 1st floor with a master bedroom and bath. And then there's an internal stair that would go up to the right-hand side, which is the 2nd floor above that. You could see how that, again, smaller footprint, dissolving that massing into the roof line, which is an additional key. So you have the ability to utilize the cabin as a structure. There's seven structures. There are 4 keys in each structure, so there are 28 keys in total. And this allows you the opportunity to rent the cabin as a whole, which would be 4 bedroom units, or you can rent the cabin as 4 separate keys and anything in between. And that flexibility is really helpful when we're thinking about how this property operates and is managed. You can also see on the left-hand side the expression of indoor-outdoor space. Again, making sure that people are always connected to nature, celebrating the intensity, the existing use and the existing nature and landscaping that's here on this property. Next slide. This is just a quick run-through of the storage units. So mentioned earlier that we have structures that are 120 by 40. That is a 28-foot wide bay. with a mezzanine on the upper floor. That mezzanine is an open mezzanine. You know, some will articulate that personally as a man cave. Some will use it as storage for kayaks and other tools for activities. But the idea is that this is a flexible space for people to store and for people to, you know, hang out lightly with a viewing deck on the mezzanine in the backside of each unit. These units will have bathrooms so people can wash and use the restroom while they're on property or in their unit that they're sold. But everyone that buys here will have access to the club, will have access to the other amenities that are at the property. So that's a run-through of where we are as a firm as it relates to the design for the property. Again, just want to reiterate that it was refreshing to have the opportunity to move this so far forward, but we are really excited about the collaboration with this board to make sure we get it right. So I am here to accept any and all feedback and to answer any questions you might have at this time.
How many other members of your team?
I have Molly Titus to describe in brief detail some of the engineering concerns that we went into and took account. And I also have Brad Waugh, who would like to just have a few words.
Why don't we hear from everyone, and then we can
Sure.
make informed
It shouldn't be too
questions.
much longer.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Molly? I'm sure you're all familiar with Molly Titus. I think she's been before you on a number of occasions.
Saying I'm old. Watch it.
Yeah, you're all set.
Yeah. Good evening, Molly Titus from Depreet Engineering. I will be brief. Depreet began its work on this property in 2015. We've supported all the existing development on the site to date. We've done soil testing, we've done wetland edge flagging, we've done research for floodplain concerns, and as part of confirming this, you know, conceptual use at this time, but still that we're performing, you know, putting forth a viable project. We've had the wetlands flagged. We've actually submitted them to DEM for wetland edge verification. That was back in November of 2025. We are still awaiting the biologist review, but we're trying. But a lot of engineering hasn't been done. You know, the site plan that was provided shows parking calculations, how we plan to manage the site, you know, fire access around all the buildings, a 24-foot wide drive coming in, which obviously we typically reduce if fire will let us. I know we try to reduce pavement as much as possible. And that's it. I mean, we feel confident that we can design, you know, best management practice for stormwater, meet all the requirements for cover and drainage, and the site will have new septic systems for these future uses. There's existing septic systems on the site today servicing the property. The site would have public water, and, you know, we're at a conceptual stage, but we've just been doing our due diligence. If you're wondering about soils, we have test pits that ended at 10 feet deep, but we're in clear sand. So as you go eastward on the site, I'm sure as we approach the boundary with the Saugatucket, that would change some, but in the majority of the site, we've got sandy soils, 10 feet with no water table. So good for engineering design, recharge, and we feel pretty confident this is something we could engineer to meet all the standards of the state. So that is all for me.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, before I bring Mr. Waugh up as well, I'd just like to state that, you know, we've put a lot of, as Mr. Pimentel mentioned earlier, we haven't done exhaustive scientific studies on anything, but we have done market research. Someone who's been also integrally involved in the project development and the concept is sitting here as well, Mr. Pete Hayes of Hayes and Sherry, Cushman and Wakefield. He's a senior partner who's done a lot of successful development around. He's assisted in some of the market studies as well. So we have a great team, and we are proceeding forward with the hopes that we can build this out to be a magnificent gem in the town of South Kingstown. But Mr. Waugh can attest to a few of those things as well. So Brad, do you want to come up and address the board?
Good evening. My name is Brad Waugh. I live at 17 Edith Road over in Narragansett. And bought this place back in 2014 from the Frisella family, who were phenomenal stewards of this property for 70 years. They did a fantastic a job of running the facility. And my son and my nephew took over the facility in 2014 and went before the town council and planning to put in the indoor gun range that exists there today. They did that for a couple of reasons. One, to have the ability to offer shooting 365 days a year without having weather-related issues. And as part of being good stewards, we worked with the town. We worked with the town council back then and planning. Everything that we said that we would build and do, we did. The town was spending over $50,000 a year to use shooting facilities north of South Kingston, and also going up into Massachusetts to use facilities there. We actually donate that to the town and allow the town to use that. In addition, we spent over $185,000 back in the year 2018 to put in three-phase power. When the town needed to connect into that, because you put in the solar facility, again, we were good stewards. We feel that we've always been good neighbors, and this is an ability for us to be what we are, which is a recreational facility. We went out to our customers, both the general public as well as members, and we said, what do you want? They said, well, we'd like to have things like pickleball, and we'd like to have a clubhouse. We'd like to be able to do weddings here. One of the things that you did here is Peter Hayes from Cushman Wakefield. We engaged in a study with them to find out, because a lot of our members said, geez, I bought this house, I have a car collection, but the insurance company says that I can't store a car at a certain level of sea level. So it can't be at sea level up to 45 feet. And over the last 20 years, the Amazon effect has caused storage facilities throughout New England, as well as here in South County, to disappear. There's over 1.9 million square feet of storage space needed in South County. We're not looking to build cubicle storage. What we're looking to do is offer upscale storage for people to put their boats and their cars and their RVs. The average cost of a center console boat now is over $500,000. The average RV is over $400,000. And in the past, I used to store my grandmother's 1947 Chrysler New Yorker over where Whaler Brewing is. I can't store it there anymore. Those facilities are disappearing. So this is an amenity not only to our members, but also to the general public. And that's what we're looking to achieve through this, to be a good neighbor and a good steward. We're not looking to take 120 acres and put in a massive housing development. We do realize that we're unique in that nobody can see us from the road. But part of the ability to attract people is to make it look good. And if you've ever been to our facility, we engaged with South County Post and Beam to build our facility there. We used local labor. And we've always been involved in the town of South Kingston, and this is our home. It's my son lives here. I do live in Narragansett, but what we wanted you to understand today is that we are looking to do a facility that will achieve the recreational aspects that we think that the town of South Kingston needs. And we're open to questions.
Thank you. If that concludes your presentation,
Yes, it does, Madam Chair.
I would like to get comments and thoughts from board members. Obviously, this type of a zone change could result in a fairly significant type of project, and obviously, we appreciate the degree to which you've been thorough with your potential plans. That will probably elicit quite a few questions from board members. Who would like to start? Paul.
So I've been here, I visited this facility, I shot there. The building that went in, I guess, about 10 years ago is very nice. It looks very much like what they're proposing here. It seems to be well-run compared to some other places that I've been to. I guess my main concern is when I first look at this, I was looking at, the cabins and thinking, would this be an expansion of weekend or weekday shooting events that would lead to more use, more noise at the facility? And I don't want to get into, obviously you're grandfathered in, the noise is the noise. I'm just curious about, I know there have been events even at the indoor range where people have come from out of state. So I'm just curious if there's an expansion of outdoor shooting that would go with this.
That's a great question, Mr. Jordan. So it's Brad Waugh again. It would not be. Right now, a lot of the people that do shoot at the facilities, as you stated, on the weekends or weekdays, who do come from places like Connecticut and as far away as New York and Pennsylvania, they're staying at places like South County Commons and other facilities.
I think some people I think I've seen campers there as well from time to time, people coming in and...
They do come in there, Mr. Jordan, but we do not allow them to stay overnight. But no, it would not be a further expansion. This, to us, is an expansion of what we are, which is a recreational facility. There is no intention to expand shooting whatsoever in any of this.
The only other question I have, and again, it doesn't necessarily go to this proposal, is lead shot still used for skeet trap shooting? Or?
Yes, it is, but not over the water.
Right.
We don't shoot over the water there. And my son, who's in the room here, we recycle our lead and brass. Actually, every single lead mine, not only in North America, but South America, was shut down a few years ago. And so we actually, we recycle on a weekly basis thousands of pounds of brass and lead.
You're able to collect the lead shot on the outside, outdoors?
The last time we
To some
did that was about 5 or 6 years ago.
Good, thank you.
And again, this is also promoting a more inclusive experience for not only the people that like to enjoy sports shooting, but also their family members, and with a variety of other activities and accoutrements that'll, make it more of a family-oriented facility as well.
Again, I would say I've certainly seen lots of families there, and again, people coming in from out of state, and even towing in their all-terrain vehicles to drive around the course. So.
Yeah, there's a certain group of people that like to have their little toys to, give them comfort while they're going around. So much for the, leg exercises.
Yeah. Thank you.
Sure.
Susan?
I'd like to ask a question of either council or staff. This ordinance that we're looking at will cover the entirety of the 122 acres. I would like to understand, and it says in the ordinance that all of these 15 things or so are allowed by right. When will we see things ahead come back to us for approval, and when will things be allowed to be built by right without planning board approval? Like there's a whole lot of there's houses, there's party tents, there's storage units. What can be built by right without seeing us, and what will need to come back before us?
So again, I can take the initial attempt at that. There is a section within their proposed amendment that their site development plan has to come through a major development review. So it isn't permitted use as of right, go get a building permit. It is, in essence, a use that's allowed once they get a site plan approved by the planning board, which requires TRC review and recommendation to the planning board. So it's different than a single-family home in an R40 zone, that once you establish a zone, someone can go on a vacant lot, not have to go to the planning board, just go directly to the building official, receive a zoning permit, and build. There is a mechanism, and Attorney Doherty touched upon it, that if the text amendment and map amendment go through, that just gives them the ability to apply to the planning board for the things that are allowed in the zone. By permitted use as of right, what that means when you review the plans is if they meet the standards associated with, we'll say the clubhouse. If they meet the standards associated with this clubhouse, dimensional review, uses within the clubhouse, square footage, stormwater, any traffic items that need to be addressed, you don't have the ability to say, we don't like the use anymore. We don't like the clubhouse. That clubhouse, once they meet the standards associated with the development plan review, you can't say no to the clubhouse. The clubhouse would be a permitted use within the zone so long as they meet the standards. And Mrs. Doherty testified earlier that if you're not necessarily comfortable with the nature of some of the standards now, that they would entertain revisions to those standards to make it more clear that some of the things they show you this evening would be more desirable to the actual product they deliver. So, a long answer to the thing, but again, they just can't go to the zoning board and get a permit. Zoning officer.
And Jamie, you're not saying that there are currently existing standards for a sports entertainment venue such as this?
Again, we do not have the nature of what they're proposing to do that exists in our regulations. That's why they're here. We did have very early on discussions where I think they tried to convince the planning department that all of these things were accessory to the shooting facility. But again, to their credit, when we pushed back a little bit on that discussion, they didn't necessarily agree with us, but they did realize that this was the best path to move forward with their development proposal.
Some questions.
Go ahead,
Is it
Susan.
my turn? Okay. So on the plan that you have for, the site plan, in the top right-hand corner, there's a little topography map here that shows 90% of the sites with a big circle around it. That appears to be the portions of the site that are not being developed. But hey, Brian, can you bring this up? Yes. Yep, the top right-hand corner.
Just, Susan, if I can, real quickly.
Is that the 20-foot radius?
I mentioned
1,000-foot
development
radius.
plan review.
Yeah.
The terminology used in their text amendment is that the board shall review development of the property as a major land development plan. So again, it comes back to the planning.
Okay, thank you.
I think that just shows the noticing requirements, the 1,000-foot.
No.
And just please restate your name if you
I'm
answer
sorry.
questions, just so that
Yeah.
it gets recorded.
Yeah, Edward Pimentel for the record. That's just a general locale and showing the 1,000-foot radius for
Okay.
noticing requirements.
Sorry, that's a different version than the one I have in my hand.
Oh.
The one I have in my hand shows, it looks like you've got a division between the part of the site that you're developing and the rest of the site, implying that you're only planning to develop a portion of the site.
So like limits of disturbance, is that what you're?
I don't know what it is. See
Yeah.
the red circle in that? You've got the site delineated into the development areas and the undevelopment areas. Oh, everybody come on up.
Somebody's in trouble.
Hey, Molly. It's this one that with the red delineation between the developed areas and the undeveloped areas. No, but it's all the upland.
And could you just answer her question in the mic, please?
Is this here dry to be built upon? Can you just pull the mic over? Sorry. Maybe I just need some clarification on understanding.
Susan, can I try? So if Ms. Titus can please explain, we'll call it the location map, that appears to show a boundary associated with notification. But also within that area, it shows a red boundary, a blue boundary, and then there's a box with the term site. So I think to Susan's point, What does the outlined area in red mean? What does the outlined area in blue mean? And what does the dashed line mean? And the reference to site, is that a reference to the entire site or a subsection of the site?
The intent of that locus is just to show the perimeter of the property and then the 1,000-foot radius. There are some wetland buffers that are showing up in weird colors. There's really no distinguishing them. The area that you pointed to, Susan, so if you were to look at this figure, in the top left corner, that area is all dry. The wetlands are to the east.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So my question is, we are reviewing a ordinance here that will affect the entirety of 100, zone change, for 120 acres. You're showing us just a little corner that you're planning to develop. But this ordinance, if we were to allow this change, will affect the entirety of a 120-acre site. And it appears that in each of these items, and there are at least a dozen different things that you'll be allowing here, single-family houses, duplexes, multifamily houses, boarding animals, outdoor shooting, indoor sport facility, hotel, motel, upscale flex storage, restaurant with alcohol, accessory entertainment, a party tent, and a clubhouse. And all of it is being concentrated in a 10% corner of the site. But I think that what we need to realize is that all of these activities could spread over 120 acres of the site.
Understood.
And I don't see an upward limit. Like you say, you're putting in 20 storage units. I don't see any terminology here to tell me you're not putting in 2,000 storage units. I'm seeing that you're putting in a pavilion, but if it's allowed by right, you could put in 10 pavilions, 2,000 houses. Like, there's no upward limit to any of the things that you're proposing, and just because you're proposing them in a little corner, I can't take that to the bank. So
Understood.
where are your, and it appears that there's a big section of site you're not developing, and maybe one answer would be to ask you if you would consider putting that in an easement so that it can't be developed. If you'll say, if you, two of you tonight said, you've got this big piece of land you're not going to develop, but this ordinance gives you the opportunity to develop all of it. And so that's a big concern for me.
Sure. Edward Pimento for the record. So I'm going to speak to what I said earlier. We are concentrating our development as has been presented tonight. We can actually craft that more into the ordinance if the board desires, so that you feel that this isn't something gotcha moment where all of a sudden there's 3 clubhouses on the property. We can also introduce top limits on the facilities, quantity, whatever the board's going to make the board feel comfortable to know that this is what our intentions are. What I did say in the beginning is we're still asking permission to retain the rights to residential development to the rest of the property, because we don't know what the future brings. Maybe at some point in the future, the rest of the property will go in a residential manner, which obviously would vacate the historical usage of the property for clay shooting, et cetera, because the two cannot work together as a matter of law. So we are preserving and protecting that right for future development, but the uses we're talking about here is we're concentrating it here, and we can add whatever language to ensure the board that that is the fact. And I'm sorry, if I could also add, I know Jamie's already mentioned it. The first thing we built into this ordinance right away, knowing that this ordinance was giving us the right to do certain uses, was that we always knew we were going to have to go and pursue what triggers the need for the actual development of the project. For example, the property is zoned R40 right now. If we came into this development and said we want to develop the whole property for residential, it's a permitted use, but it's going to trigger a major land development project. So we tie that back in even to these uses. We will be triggering a major land development. We foresee maybe an opportunity where we get a master plan that works in conjunction with one another and maybe phase. We don't know how that's going to play out, but we obviously want to do that in accordance with your rules and regs and make the board feel comfortable. But this will be triggering that whole review.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So I guess we might look at this differently if you showed 500 housing units on that property. So I can only pretend that I see 500 housing units on that property, because you're unwilling to give up that part of your request in the ordinance. So we're going to assume that at some point in time, the entirety of this property the entirety, except for the wetlands, are going to be developed.
Well, I mean, we're not speaking to a comp permit now. I can't speak to what a comp permit could do on this property, right? Because that gives you different density requirements. So outside of a comprehensive permit, in the regs, we talk about the density would be limited to 1 unit per acre of upland resources. So it's 122 acres. If we exclude the area that's already developed, if we exclude the area that would otherwise be deemed unsuitable for development, obviously we haven't gotten to that degree. There's no way we could even come close to that number outside of an affordable housing project.
Right. Okay, so a couple of other questions. Are any of these cottages for sale? Would one of your visitors be able to just purchase one of these cottages?
Are you talking about the guest cabins?
Yes.
I don't, no, I'll leave it, I don't believe it, I'll leave it to.
Yes, we do envision condoing the storage units, the flex storage units.
You're talking about the guest
No, I know, and we do envision selling the cabins, as we call them.
Okay, so it wouldn't be a timeshare hotel sort of situation. These are actually housing units for...
They're rental units that would be overnight units. So if we may sell those off, we also might just keep them and just rent them out ourselves. We haven't made that determination yet. Or treat them like a timeshare, yeah.
Yeah, I'm thinking about the housing. So if you say you've got 20 of these things and you sold them off to...
By the way, I should have announced myself. So Brad, yes, Ms. Axelrod, we actually have 7 cabins, so that would be, multiply that by 4 per unit, so that's 28, and then there's 6 units in the actual clubhouse.
Right.
So there's a total of 34 units, but we do envision selling those cabins at 1 unit apiece.
Right. And so I assume that there'll be some portion of those that'll be deed restricted affordable, because that's our town and our state law, that if you've built more than 5 units, 25% or 20% need to be deed restricted affordable. So would you make these cottages available for LMI?
They would not be permanent residences. They would be for nightly rentals.
But you're selling...
That's why I wanted to jump in, because you said earlier that if you decided to come back in the future and say, we've got this balance of 100 acres to the north, if you want to do residential development there, your outdoor shooting range has to go away. You can't have both.
Correct.
And so I would assume the same thing with these. As a hotel use associated with the venue, it's one thing. But the minute you say, oh, Paul, you can come in and buy this as a private residence and live right next door to the shooting range, now you've got a compatibility problem with the shotgun. So it doesn't work.
So Madam Chair, if I may, again, Jamie Rabbit, Planning Director.
Go ahead, Jamie.
I think some of the discussion we've had early on with the applicant is devoid of ownership of an individual unit, the functionality of the unit has to be hotel-centric. If it isn't, if Paul Jordan, to your point, can purchase a unit and, quote, say, I'm only occasionally staying there, it has to, in essence, be more treated like a residential unit, because there's no way for the town to police whether he's there every night or not night. But again, I think Paul Jordan could have an ownership interest in one of the units and then choose to sublet on a nightly, weekly, or monthly basis. But it wouldn't be, to Ms. Axelrod's point, a functional single-family residential unit for year-round occupations. The model is in place that exists at the Ocean House in Westerly and other facilities up and down the East Coast. But again, it can't have a functionality of a single-family unit. Otherwise, they would be under the guidance of inclusionary zoning, where they have to do a component affordability. If the board feels we need additional language in the regulations, I'm sure the applicant would accommodate it. It would still allow whoever owned the property, ran the property, to potentially sell a unit. Right. Just the functionality of that unit would be, in essence, short-term rental.
But any change to expansion of residential use on the property would negate the outdoor shooting range, which is really the primary function there.
And again, at some point, they could reduce the size of that, but again, all of that has to come, if it's a subdivision, it comes back to you. If it's a multifamily type development with single property line, that comes back to you.
I mean, I think, I know Mr. Pimentel mentioned the comp permit, and I think we all went, 100 acres comp permit, wait a minute, but you can't do residential there and have a shooting range, outdoor shooting range, so.
Susan, are you finished with your questions? Or you-
Almost, I
Keep going.
promise. Sorry. Could you explain to me again the statement that they will be for sale, potentially to some of your members?
Potentially.
But
I-
how is that different than buying a condo down the street? Like, how do you envision, if I were to purchase one of these units, I can pretty much just live in it, yes?
No, it would be a timeshare basis.
So I can't purchase it. I can purchase a timeshare in it.
You can purchase a unit. You would only, if I recall the IRS regulations, you could only use it for a maximum of 2 weeks per year. That's it. And then other than that, it would be rented out, and that individual would receive some percentage for the rentals.
Okay.
But the IRS, for this type of thing, we would not be able to allow the person permanent residency.
Okay. So this would need to have something built into the ordinance to say that
And again, I think,
it
as
cannot
I
be used as
mentioned,
residence?
yeah, as Attorney Doherty mentioned earlier, as well as I, that if there are certain provisions that the planning board feels less comfortable with and thinks that additional language is needed, I think to your point, the applicant would work with the planning department and modify their text amendment to include that language, or if it's something the applicant was resistant to, you can make a recommendation that when it goes to town council, that the town council take that up.
Yeah. Okay. I'd like to ask about the party tent, the accessory structure, and the entertainment that comes with a wedding, and what your plans are with that, and what you are planning to put into an ordinance about that portion of the use.
So the intention there is to use that for rental for weddings. Currently, we do events at the facility, and the current tent is not large enough to handle that. So this would be for corporate events as well as weddings, and that's the intention for that.
And I would assume a wedding comes with live music, or should come with amplified music?
It could, yes.
So this property, aside from Rose Hill, is entirely surrounded by residential land. And you
That is
may
correct.
have a party band at midnight rocking out the neighborhood. I'm concerned about that. And I'm concerned about the neighbors. So I live in Kingston,
Yep.
and I hear your gunshots all day Sunday. And I live in Kingston, and when the URI marching band is practicing up at the Fine Arts parking lot, I love it. I live near near a university, but I listen to that marching band from my backyard. If you're having live amplified bands at this site, there are a whole lot of directions that music is going to travel. And especially
agree.
if we're not encumbered by any restriction on how often or how late at night or how you can have live music on this property. And it didn't go unnoticed to me that your perimeter notification list of what neighbors were notified didn't include any of the houses on Broad Rock Road whose backyard abut your property. Just because they're across that river, I'm sure they're listening to your gunshots, but I'm certain they'll be listening to your amplified music also. And so that amplified music is going to be a stumbling block for me, too.
So Ms. Axelrod, if we wanted to put a restriction on a time on that, we have no problems with that. So if most facilities, I believe, I used to be on the Rhode Island Convention Center Authority board, and as well as a commissioner at some other facilities, but we had time restrictions, and I have no issues with that. So if the suggestion from planning is that there's a cutoff of 10 p.m. at night, or whatever you suggest, that's something that we would definitely consider.
I have other questions, but I can wait.
Okay. As you can see, the breadth of this zone change is significant. So not only will there be, I think, considerable number of questions from the board, and probably those same questions could potentially come up at a public hearing before the council. So I think it's important to give the board adequate time to really understand the potential impacts of this plan or any other that could result from this sort of a zone change. Who else has got questions? Armand?
As I look at this right now, the original request is to make a zone change with a designation of the preserve. Are we going to develop specific uses that will be permitted in that zone, or I know they've suggested some, but it's a broad range. Are we going to permit? We're going to develop specific uses that will be permitted in that area, because then I think that would address some of the concerns as to what other uses could eventually be. Because since it's R40 now, are we going to eliminate the R40 designation by this change, or is that still going to stay on some of the property?
Yeah, so Armin, under their proposed regulatory change, they have permitted uses under their new section 610.5, which is single-family household, two-family, multi-household, flexible design residential projects, the boarding of animals, bow and arrow range, indoor shooting range, indoor sports facilities, so motel, hotel, upscale flex storage, restaurant, alcohol, accessory uses. Say they do have a list that they are proposing.
Those will be spelled out in the proposed action.
Or potentially modified by the board.
Yes.
While Armin's looking at that, just one question for Jim. Does the zoning change have to apply to the entire property?
I defer to legal, but that's what the applicant is asking for.
No, it doesn't.
Okay. You don't have to subdivide it. You could get zoning change on a portion of the property without...
You could have a split zone property, yes.
Okay. I mean, and I'm not suggesting that that's the route I want to go in. I'm just asking the question because I think maybe we could look at this phase one sort of part of the development without having to be overly concerned about what happens with the other 100 acres right off the bat. But again, that's the applicant's call. But
Armin, do you have other questions at this point? Who else would like to ask questions? Robin?
Am I correct in assuming that you do not see this from the Rose Hill Road? Because we did a lot of talking about the architecture, but I'm never going to go in there and see that, right? So that, I don't, so the applicant has made reference several times to how this is something our community needs. And I don't really see this as something the community needs. It looks like something most people of our community would never go to. And what our community does need is protection from infringement, right? So you're in an R40 zone, and I can't really agree with you that you're not going to intensify the shooting use by making this attractive resort for people to come and shoot. So I disagree that you're not intensifying that. I know that the preserve in Richmond across from, I stopped being willing to grocery shop at Stop and Shop because it was so unnerving to walk across that parking lot and hear shooting. And I don't know how many people have ever been involved in an active shooting practice, but it's very disturbing to hear gunfire for those of us who have been through that training. I wouldn't want to live next to anything where I had to hear shooting all day long. And then to Susan's point, with the wedding venues, we all know that's a lot of noise. So when you talk about what our community needs, I don't think our community needs all that noise and all that extra people from the outside. So personally, I'm taking a little offense when you keep saying this is what our community needs.
So,
Can I take something?
sure.
I don't believe that we spoke about community needs. I think it was more, we are presenting a destination place that would be a gem in the town, certainly adding to the tax base. I don't think anyone needs any of this, quite frankly. I mean, well, that's admitted. And if I did say need, then I'm absolutely misspoke.
It says it several times in the documents. And I believe you even said it this evening a few times.
Well, then I correct myself if I had said that. Thank you.
So Brad Waugh, I respect your statement, and just to give you a little history on the Peacedale Shooting Preserve, the Frisella family back in the year 2000 voluntarily shut down the majority of outdoor shooting, decreasing the noise from rifles and pistols substantially. A rifle, and some people in the room would agree with me, can generate well over 135 to 140 decibels. Shotguns generate a lot less noise, and that's the only thing that's shot outdoors. The indoor gun range is set up to decrease noise substantially. Very muffled, you can't hear it from, quite frankly, any of the distances that we're talking about, such as the neighborhood across the river. The second thing is that our neighbors begged us to not bring back the kennels. To quote one of our neighbors, the kennels. The Peacedale Shooting Preserve had the largest kennel in the state of Rhode Island, authorized for 166 dogs and cats. It was also used by the town of South Kingston as their facility. I used to own a dog, and they do bark 365 days of the year. So when you do speak about noise, having a dog barking, 166 dogs barking at 3 a.m. in the morning is pretty bad. So being a good neighbor, we have never brought that back, even though that would be extremely profitable to us. That is, and it's something that the members, as well as the general public, have requested on several occasions. We never brought that back. So what we're looking to do here, I do understand your concerns on noise, and respectfully on that, if somebody wants to put in a time limit on that noise, we're happy to do that. We are also, when we approached town planning and the town council back in the year 2016, hours were set that we could do shooting. In addition, a little other history is that in order to have an indoor gun range in the town of South Kingston, you need a minimum of 120 acres. That was set by your predecessors back in the year 2016. So when we talk about selling a condo unit, it's within the auspices of that regulation of we couldn't break up the 120 acres. And so we've been respectful to your predecessors and what they set aside at that point in time.
I think I did see kennel as an allowed use in this ordinance proposal.
That is something that I am more than willing to give up.
And perhaps we could eliminate outdoor shooting altogether. That would be a favor to your neighbors.
That is something that I'm not willing to give up because, quite frankly, it's a large amount of revenue for our facility. And so giving that up would be a financial burden of a huge magnitude. So it would actually put us out of business. And then that would put us into a position where we would have to sell the land and put in a housing development. It's not a threat, it's just an economic situation.
Liz?
I just would like to ask a question, and I have a comment on the storage units. There are a lot of different types of buildings going on in this proposed development, and even though the uses are so different from what you've shown us in terms of the renderings, the scale seems to be somewhat compatible and of a similar size. However, I don't feel that way about the storage units. So my question is, one, even though you did say you tried to make it look compatible with the elements of the town, I'm not so sure that's really happened. And I don't know if it is even possible with the sizes that you need for the storage. I don't know that much about automobile storage units. But I would also ask, and I can't really tell from these renderings, how much buffering there is between the storage units and everything else going on the site and everything going on around the outside edge. So maybe you could explain that a little bit more?
I'm going to bring Eric Joyna up here, who's the architect, and Molly Titus from Dupree.
Eric Zwena. The units are based on a very specific module, the storage units. Each structure has 10 units inside of it. 28 feet wide, which allows for vehicles to come in and have space on either end side of the garage, and then the depth is 60 or 70 feet. That wall, the midspan, or if you can imagine there being a separation wall up the center along the ridge line, you would have the other 5 storage units on the opposite side with the same sort of approach, garage door and front door for people to access. We do envision that there will be buyers that require multiple bays. What that would allow us to do is have a little bit more diversity in architecture, so less garage doors potentially, or maybe 1 entry door instead of 2 entry doors, right? That's going to be dictated by as the units sell, we would respond that way architecturally. We're also building this in phases, as I mentioned earlier, so, based on market demand, we can, if we want to tweak something in phase 2, we can tweak something in phase 2 and 3. ZDS is involved in other properties like this that have the desire or the market studies that have been done where the need, again, I don't want to use the word need just based on previous discussion, but there are several citizens in this community that are looking for this additional space to store things, whether it be fishing rods or a Ferrari or a center console boat or an RV, as mentioned before. And so there is a great demand, again, not a need, but a demand for these units. And it'll be dictated, the architecture will be dictated by how many bays are sold to each individual. This is worst case scenario because we're assuming that every bay is sold separately to a different buyer.
And Brad Waugh again, it should be noted, the first of these were built in Middletown, Rhode Island. They're called the Newport Car Vaults. The second set is right on Route 2, which you actually can't see from the road. And those are the facilities in Exeter. And the third group of these has been built in Quonset.
And I think, just a comment here, you can't see any of this from the road, so.
Yeah, if you can go back to, I'm sorry, if you can just go back to that, you can leave it here.
I brought up this one to try and show this lower corner here where the property juts out in the southeast. And then if you go to the aerial map, let me bring it up. You can see down where this is jutting out, so that the units are going to be way back here, so they're not even remotely close to Rose Hill Road, and they're a good 500 or 600 feet off of the houses, separated by a lot of woods over towards Broad Rock.
Thank you.
Yeah, and if you look just to the south, just below here, that 35-acre field, which belongs to the town of South Kingston, That's your emergency field where snowstorms, hurricanes, we put all the stuff that's left over. So the only thing that's between that property and there is your transfer station.
So just want to add one more comment in response to the question about buffering, specifically to our site at a more of a micro scale. If you go back to the overall site plan, you'll see that we've done, working with the staff, thinking about parking and parking needs. We feel like we've tightened up the asphalt to as tight as we can to give us the parking that we need around the perimeter, but to preserve as much landscaping as possible. So if we were to zoom in on that site plan, maybe you guys can do it, and your package is in front of you, you'll see all the dimensions that show the extent of asphalt and extent of disturbance of that area.
Can you go back to the previous image? The aerial? Yes. That was it.
Microsoft DOS operating system is such a great platform. It's bad.
So, Madam Chair, this
Yes.
is a cut and paste from their development proposal on the town's GIS system tax map, showing the perimeter boundary.
Yes, and is this an accurate depiction of the current vegetative cover?
Yes. This is leaf on. So
Okay. All right.
if you just bear with me 1 second, if we just move this away, there was the lower field they talked about in their presentation, and when we drop that onto the site, that's a fair estimation of where the southern portion is proposed to be developed.
It's
So,
last year's aerial photo, 2025, I think.
Fall 2025.
right, so I have a few questions and comments about things that will come up throughout the process. First of all, I remember when it was a kennel and went to field trials there, and we don't have any place in the state anymore that is that kind of, has that kind of ability. I was also on the board when the current use was approved, so am fairly familiar with the history of this site. I don't recall, and perhaps it's something that has evolved since then, when the indoor shooting range was approved, that there was any mention made of any future development or changes. I recall that this was something that was allowed, and that this would be kind of the final version, and that the rest of the property would be preserved. And to Susan's point, Mr. Pimentel did say that they would preserve the forest to the extent that we can, which that language isn't particularly comforting, just so you know. And the idea of a conservation easement or something such as Susan suggested is a good idea. The soil conditions, the analysis of that, I know that Molly Titus mentioned that some analysis have been done, but I believe Mr. Doherty said that nothing terribly scientific had been done. So everyone is pretty much aware that there's a considerable amount of lead in the soil, and it would be important for us to know what site constraints there are with regard to soil, to potential for water quality and quantity with this type of a development or something that would be allowed under the zone change. The fact that it's adjacent to a Superfund site, I would imagine there has been some hydrologic analysis, but again, that's something we would want to know about. Things that would come up, again, you've heard from other board members, noise. Is there currently existing noise from the indoor gun range? Lighting, that's something with, again, allowed uses of this potential scale, that would be an issue, and granted, that would be considered during a development plan review scenario. However, I can tell you, driving by the place on my way home from planning board meetings, the driveway looks like a baseball field at night, overlit. I think also that given the potential for, again, a great project or important considerations that should be made, a site visit would be in order of the planning board. It would be important for us to know the integrity of the pond or any other water bodies on the site. Some of my fellow board members have asked about uses being allowed by guests, ATVs, events, and so on. I believe Susan mentioned abutting property owners, particularly those that may be just beyond 200 feet. Somebody said, I can't remember if it was Mr. Doherty or Mr. Pimentel, that they have spoken to some abutters or neighbors, so that would be good for us to hear about. Again, questions that have come up, the weddings, the events, we have had, and again, it's multiple, and I think we understand that you're trying to create a multifaceted entertainment type facility. But again, having a greater understanding of the impacts of those, I mean, you had a lot of very interesting things, the golf simulation, the fitness center, and so on, but what would the impact be to the site itself and to the abutting property owners? So I know that's a lot of questions, but they are going to come up, and these are things I think information that you need to bring to us in order for us to better understand the project itself. And Mr. Doherty and others have been before this board many times, and you know that we are very detail-oriented because we need to be. We have to often consider the worst negative impacts of language that may be submitted and try to mitigate that. What have I left out? Caper, you've been strangely quiet. Do you have any thoughts?
Traffic. We left off
Traffic. So in order for this to, I think, proceed in a thorough manner, we need to address the time frame, as I stated earlier in the meeting, and I don't know how board members feel about a site visit, but it would make a whole lot more sense for us to be out there with somebody showing us, this is where this is, this is where this could be, these are the, potential limits of disturbance, this is the forested canopy that could be preserved. It just makes a lot of sense, because it's a lot.
So I agree with the site visit, except that you're not giving us a plan to be reviewed.
Right.
When you come back after this zoning change, this might be 100% different than what you're showing us tonight. So I realize that you're thinking it won't be, but we have no guarantee that anything that we ended up reviewing for a development plan review will look anything like what you're showing us tonight. And also, you've just said, we're keeping it tight so we don't cut down too many trees. Well, I don't see that written into the ordinance. So when you do a project, you can cut down all the trees you like, because we won't have any power to keep it tight with a big buffer unless it's written into what we're doing here.
We'd be happy to work with staff to put in some additional performance standards, or standards that would be required to be met in any type of a review by the planning board on a development plan. We'd be happy to do that. We do plan, and I want to clear up something too. I think what was stated about need was that South County has a need for $1.9 million worth of storage space.
1.9 million square feet.
Or square feet. Well, yeah, what did I say? Oh my gosh. Yeah, so I didn't say that. It was brought up by, that was something that was found in one of the market studies that were done through Hayes and Sherry as well. So I want to clear that up. I don't think the town of South Kingstown needs that, but I think there are members of the community that would certainly avail themselves to that. And insofar as the storage facilities are concerned, if you go and look at what has been done in Middletown and elsewhere, they're magnificent. I mean, I've gone to black tie events at the Middletown facility, and you could eat off the floor. The people that are interested in purchasing these facilities are steadfast, clean fanatics, and they don't want lint on the vehicles or any of the things that they're storing. It's very high-end things, and the reason that this fits in with that, again, is the elevation. This is a great place for that to occur because of the elevation above sea level. But again, go
Yeah,
ahead.
and if, Brad Waugh, one of the questions that was asked, Ms. Mack, was there is a concern that by doing this, it would increase the amount of shooting. And as my son was texting me, that is actually impossible. Because when you have a gun range that has 16 lanes in it, and you're only open from 9 o'clock to 7 o'clock at night, and those lanes are being used, you'd have to add more lanes. And that's not, I'd have to come before you to increase the amount of shooting. We're also limited outside to 55 stations. And again, as I believe Mr. Jordan has been there, he will attest that it would be impossible for us unless I came back before you to increase the amount of stations.
Yeah, I was just going to ask, I know that on weekends, it's pretty steady all day
Yeah.
long. You've got a crowd of people coming in. It's not like you could necessarily fit more tee times in.
Maximum utilization is about 85%, and we just couldn't handle anything more than that. So I believe it was Ms. Pothier that asked that question or had a concern, and it's a valid one, but I would have to come before you to increase the amount of physical shooting lanes, and I couldn't do that.
How late do they shoot in the evening now? At this time of the year when we've got long days, are they shooting till late in the evening, or is there
Just about dusk, around 7
dusk
p.m.
all year round? It's
Yeah.
dusk. Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
And even things like ATVs and potential internal traffic, that's also something to be considered. But I think that if the board has a better understanding of the site itself and the conditions within the site, then it will help to inform any potential performance standards or anything of that nature that the board might feel should be incorporated into a zone change.
Yes, Ms. Mack, I'd love to have the board, yourself, I'm available, I'm here, so we'd love to entertain you and let us know your schedule, and we'll have you come walk the property.
That would be very helpful.
Although we might do a golf cart because the amount of ticks out this year is unbelievable, so.
And with respect to lighting as well, too, we could certainly work on shielding to have a minimally invasive
It's
amount.
actually already shielded.
Yeah, but any future development, I mean, I know Mr. Rabbit and this board have placed many constraints on other things like, Prout School, their athletic fields as well. There's a big concern about that, so we'd be sensitive to that, and we'd abide by whatever sort of standards you wish to impose on that.
Yeah, I just, two things. One, towards the board, I want to just caution, I think you want to not get into too many of the details that you will be dealing with as a land development project. I think this was your first question to me, Madam Chair. I'm coming back to that. To focus on the zone change elements. So, for example, hours of operation for the wedding venue, outside noise, I think that's something good to get nailed down ahead of time. Something about, the limits of disturbance as far as the trees, something like that. A lot of the rest of the stuff, I think, should wait until you have a plan in front of you if zone change passes for that major land development review. The second part, I think, is probably directed towards the applicant. From what I've heard, I think if you want to proceed in a timely fashion, I think it might behoove you to very much narrow the area of what you're proposing for the zone change. Because if you don't, then you're going to get into all these other issues about the rest of the property and all the outdoor shooting. If you narrow it down to the areas that you want to develop, it seems much more efficient for a recommendation to the council, for a positive recommendation at that point.
Thanks, Andy. Anything else that we want to convey to the applicant at this point? So we will try to schedule some kind of site visit. You will work with staff to come up with a reasonable time frame for this board to make a decision beyond, I'm just trying to find the date that was on the, 29th. Yeah, like 2 weeks or something from now.
Does the public get to talk?
Excuse me?
Does the public get to speak tonight?
So this isn't a public hearing, but there are folks in the audience, and if people would like to come up and briefly state opinions, please just state your name for the record.
Hi, my name is Tony Lisa, Arviso Jeans. I live on the south side, and someone referenced that there was no housing between their property line and the transfer station, but we are right there. And this is my husband, Rich Fursella Jr.
Okay, so you just need to state your name so that it's picked up on the record, and then you can point to the map.
Oh, okay. So in reference to the noise, our bedroom is on the second floor. We can see the clubhouse when they're shooting indoor range, bang, 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 until late into the night. So my concern would be the noise. In addition, the traffic. We're talking about a wedding. How big? How late are they going to be there? What about the noise? Is shooting going to still be going on? So we're having two events, shooting and a wedding? I'd like to know that. Can our water system handle all of this? What about all the lead in the property? We're talking about selling homes. I wasn't asked if I wanted to go to a pickleball. I could actually go to Narragansett. I don't need these things. We don't need more people coming into our neighborhood. We need to preserve the things we have. I didn't grow up here, but I love this town.
Yeah, we'd be very concerned about a buffer zone.
Please restate your name, just so.
Sorry.
Yep. Tony Lisa,
No.
Arviso Jeans. I live at 129 Pearls Way. And no, I didn't receive a notice, actually,
No, I
that this
meant
was
your
going on.
husband, and this
Oh.
isn't a public
yeah,
hearing.
I'm
so
sorry.
there was no
It's
notice.
Richard Frizella Jr. Sorry about that.
It's
That
just
was
a
very
work
well
session.
spoken. From that window to that window is our bedroom to a pickleball, a tent, a wedding. We would hear the whole ceremony. We'd probably have to leave for the night every time they have a wedding. And our dogs would go insane, our kids would go insane, our relatives are all around us here and up the road. So that would really concern me. The traffic coming down our driveway would be like 95. It wouldn't be the house, it wouldn't be the way of life that we have. It would be a whole new way of life for our family. The shooting, the shotgun shooting, it stops, at sunset. This would go on all night, and the traffic would go on all night. We'd have strangers coming onto our property drunk, probably. There's no buffer zone. There's literally a cool little grass area they put in where we had a stone wall between us and them. It would be a nightmare for our family if there was no buffer, and we had hundreds of strangers coming over onto our property, keeping us up all night. It's already bad when they come in at night and get all our dogs barking, and we wake up and we have to come out and see who's out there at night with our driveway right in their property line. So it would be life-changing for a lot of people, especially at night. During the day, yeah, you're going to have some noise there. We've accepted that. But after dark, we really want to have, we want to enjoy our property like we thought we could. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Hello, my name is Xavier Sherman. I am the son of the previous two speakers, and I live at the same residence. I think it's relevant to point out that the applicant has tried to adjoin our road with theirs and form into a loop, which, even though it is outside of their control, Google Maps and all the other app navigation systems, they bring all of their traffic down our road, and so we have to deal with Uber drivers, people getting lost, and to back up what Richard said, it just adds more to the noise and nuisance that we have to deal with. I would like to reiterate into the record that during the presentation, the language of for sale and single family home was used many times. And as pointed out by the council, you can't have a shooting range and single family ownership in the same, I don't know what you call it, unit or same thing. And to what was talked about amplified music does not follow property lines. We have across the street a golf course, which they do events, I assume, because there's music and things that come from there, which is fine, but that's across the street. We're now talking about our neighbor holding events directly next to us, which, as they did say in their application, would serve alcohol. And along with being surrounded by a residential area, which they did say they did notify some owners, along with myself and the other people that have spoke. There are other owners that are on Rose Hill. They didn't get notified. And as being a residential resident that's right next to it, I think it would disproportionately affect our quality of life. And I have, as being part of a family that did own that gun club, I have been around many shooting ranges, and I have, because I'm an inquisitive person, measured the decibel count of the shotguns and weaponry that would be used. As the applicant said, it at a minimum starts at 150 decibels. They hold events there, tournaments, which have hundreds of people, usually during the weekends. And as one of the other council members said, I have also, we lived in Richmond right next to that preserve. And during tournaments, we lived at that, there's like a condo complex across the street. It's unmistakable. You can just hear just thousands of shots. I would shop at Stop and Shop. You can hear it there. So, and we're right next door. So when they have these events, and then on top of it, the weddings, it's just noise upon noise upon noise. And also when the applicant says that they stop at dusk, because we have dogs and I tend to take care of them at night, many times you can hear their underground range being used well past 10 p.m. many times. And that's it.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Richard Fasella Sr. I'm 82 years old. I was born here. I've walked that shooting preserve all my life. I look at this and you talk about noise. I don't really hear the noise. To me, it's popcorn, like popcorn going off. I don't think it really bothers the neighbors that much. They get used to it. But you got to look at things here like Peacedale Shooting Preserve's got a river on the east side and on the west side. Saugatuck River comes out of Indian Lake, comes right down through Peacedale Pond, beautiful place, the high schools, Wakefield School, if they, whatever, right through the town of Wakefield. So now you're looking at increasing sewerage, whatever, polluting the grounds. Think of the future now, what's going to happen. It's going to run right down through town. Excuse me, my phone. The only way I can understand is I have to read what you're saying on my phone. So I'm going to turn it off for now. But think of this, these two rivers, one is a brook on the east, on the west side, that goes dry maybe 3 months out of the year. Saugatuck River, water all the time. That's right in the backyard of these buildings that they're going to build here, right? I just hate to see the town get polluted by adding to that sewage going into that river. Another thing, you got a transfer station, a landfill dump to the south of this property. It stinks. You got garbage and rubbish going in there every day. I lived through this all my life. I've walked that property. I know the smell on that property better than anybody there is, right? It's not as bad now with the small transfer station like it was when we had a big landfill dump there and it was open. There was sometimes we couldn't even live in the house. So you got to think of this pollution, smell, the odor there. When I say I've been there all my life, we train dogs. My father was a professional dog trainer. We used that property to run dogs, half an hour, 45 minutes, on horseback, on four-wheelers. We stepped every part of that property, we've been on it. When you get south of the property, you get near that transfer station, you can smell it. And I can say that halfway down where these houses are, if you got halfway down, you can smell that. You're going south. You got south winds that's bringing that smell to the north. I smelled it so many times. You got to think of this, what it's going to do. What is it going to affect the town? You build these houses, you bring these people in, someday that smell is going to hit the bottom of those houses. So you're going to be in a big battle here. What's going to happen? The town's going to close the transfer station down to accommodate the people living in them houses now. So don't do it. Don't let it happen, you know. Anyways, that's what I have to say. So you got to consider the smell from that dump. One time years ago, one of my dogs, this would be daily. I always train the dogs, probably 40 dogs I had in my kennels, and I trained them. And we were right down towards that transfer station and back. And at some point, you would smell that odor. It's certain days it's bad. Most of the days it's not. It seems like a south-west wind that comes off there comes right up through that middle of that area they're going to build these houses on. Right? One time I was going down there and I got probably right in the middle of where these houses are going to be built. I could smell smoke. What the heck's going on? Smoke. When I got down to the property line, I can see the smoke. It's coming from the transfer station. It's on fire. So what do? I call the town, the police, and they come in, they put the fire out. If I hadn't done that, the police probably would have burnt right to the ground. So you do have an odor that comes out of the south, very strong in the summertime. Sometimes when you're talking 90, 100-degree temperatures with maybe a 10-mile-an-hour wind, it's strong. It's strong. So think about that. That's all I have to say.
Sure. Thank you. Anyone else who wishes to comment? All right, if no one else has anything they'd like to say at this point,
Madam Chair, your next regularly scheduled meeting is June 23rd.
right, that is not a lot of time to get answers to the questions, to have a site visit and so on, which is why I believe the applicant is willing to give the board enough time to make a complete assessment, and you referred to that earlier as well, correct?
I will defer to Mr. Doherty.
Yes, I mean, we're willing to, get a reasonable extension of time afforded the board to certainly come down and see what we have with eyes on the ground, feet on the ground.
Yes, we're actually fortunate that this was a work session item, not part of one of our regular meeting.
And we appreciate the opportunity to be a part of the work session. Yes, thank you.
Thank you. I asked that if,
Okay, well,
if you have additional thoughts,
yep.
bring them up now.
Having had some members of the audience speak, and one of the things we didn't ask you about earlier was traffic. I didn't realize that the driveway was shared with a neighboring residence. Is it?
No, Pearl's Way is not associated with this property, to the best of my knowledge.
So, Brad Waugh, we have a separate entrance, and it is identified as Ms. Mack has probably seen driving down the road there. It says Peacedale Shooting Preserve, Elite Indoor Gun Range. Do people occasionally drive in the other entrance? Yeah, they do. There's been a gun facility there since 1949, so people sometimes go down that other road. We can't.
So is Pearl's Way private? And are you the only thing on Pearl's Way?
So we own, there are, of that road, Pearl's Way, we are one of the owners of that road. We do not use it. We were asked by the fire department to keep the road accessible, and we do that. But we do not utilize it. We have our own separate entrance. And matter of fact, you just brought it up, so if I could just quickly point. Yes, right where you have the red dot there, that is a driveway. We built that in 2018, and we've actually, because the bridge that is on Pearl's Way has a weight limitation, we actually allow the neighbors sometimes to bring heavy objects down our road. But to answer your question, it is, Pearl's Way is private, and there are, to the best of my knowledge, there are 1, 2, 3, 4 owners on that.
Okay. So you're a part owner of Pearl's Way,
That is correct.
but you don't use Pearl's Way?
We don't use it. That is correct.
Okay, but your address is Pearl's Way?
I'm sorry?
But your address is Pearl's Way, but that's physically not the road you use to access your property?
We don't use it.
Okay.
It's a dirt road.
Okay. Can I also ask you about the smell, the southern end of your property? And is that?
There's a
an
transfer
obstacle?
station. I mean, your town's generating the smell.
Yeah, but brides don't like that smell. So,
It depends what's been eaten the night before. I can't I can't attest to the odors, but
you're building a wedding and upscale venue downwind from the transfer station. So I guess I'm just wanted to inquire about that.
So we've been
about that
owners
decision.
there for 11 years, and in that time frame, do we occasionally smell stuff? Yeah, we do, but not all the time. There has to be a southerly breeze, and as most of us know, it's mostly a northerly breeze here at our facility, at least.
Okay. And then lastly, have you done any sort of traffic study about what Rose Hill Road will look like if you have a big wedding, a big event, 500 people attending a wedding at your property, and how that roadway would manage that volume of traffic?
So I don't envision, Ms. Axelrod, that we would have 500 people. That tent couldn't support more than 250 people that we're looking at. So, and we already do have events that have that amount of people, sometimes more. The Department of Environmental Management has an annual event at our facility, which there's well over 300 people at that event. And as far as the traffic studies go, it's a great question, but these storage facilities are very rarely used. People typically, they bring in their RV in the fall, and they leave it there in the wintertime, and they come and pick it up. The same with the boats. The cars, my family owns 14 car dealerships up in Massachusetts and New Hampshire, and I can attest to, my brother's a car collector. He doesn't look at his cars all that much. There's very little traffic, no pun intended, into these storage facilities. The primary reason for these storage facilities is people have been buying along the coastal Rhode Island. They can't store their cars in the garage. If the car's worth over $300,000, $200,000, they can't leave it in their garage for more than 7 days. The insurance companies will not allow that. So they have to be stored 45 feet above sea level.
Thank you.
I think there may be some comments related to your question.
And one thing I'd like to add as well, if you don't mind, please.
Yeah.
Insofar as concerns about environmental and contamination, I mean, we absolutely have to satisfy standards. There won't be any increase in runoff. There won't be any effluent flowing into any ecological areas whatsoever. It's all got to be done to design standards approved by DEM. So these fears are not realistic in terms of any development. And I'm sure this board and the engineering peer review and the TRC is going to ensure that that isn't even a possibility.
Nevertheless, there are things that should be brought up, given the site. And the,
no, I
adjacent
understand
uses and
people's
so on.
concerns.
Yeah.
I just wanted to state, for the benefit not only of the board, but there's a commitment to following the best management practices for everything that will be done on the property.
So Tony, Lisa, Arviso Jeans again, and Richard Frisella Jr. So about the traffic, what would be the maximum amount of people on the property if everything was built?
Okay,
would be my question.
I
and
just-
then the other thing about Pearl's Way is
Yeah, I was going to say, these
the
might
private.
be details related to a specific development plan review, which we're not in, but
Okay.
Any general input that you
Yes,
can
about
give
the
us?
driveway. So that's a privately owned driveway going in.
They have a right of way.
The dirt
They don't own the
road
driveway.
mentioned.
They can't take a stone off the driveway. They can drive from A to B to get to their property. It's a right of way. The bridge is kind of cracked in the middle. We have an agreement, we have a little rope across it. From time to time, they can open it and use the driveway. So they have a right of way. So in theory, they could say, oh, we're gonna put 300 cars on this driveway when they leave here tonight. They're probably legally okay to do that. From time to time, I've mentioned to them, please drive completely onto your property. Don't park on our property and walk over and do some stuff at 9 o'clock at night, have a party, come back. It's not a parking lot. We respect your right to get to the property, but they could open up that dirt road anytime and make that a Route 95. I would assume they could do that. We keep it a dirt road on purpose because we don't want cars flying down there with the kids and the dogs and the cats, and they've been very respectful to us. They only open it if they have a problem, and we have a good relationship, but that could change. Originally they wanted a road in, and then you drive out the back way. They wanted Pearl's Way to be a continuous circle. And then somebody said, no, you can't on your own turn something into a road without talking to the town. So they changed. I could be wrong.
So it's a private roadway with multiple owners, and the applicant has a right-of-way
He has a
to
right
use
of
it.
way. Correct.
Okay.
Correct. He does not own that road. He cannot take a scoop of dirt off that road. I guess that would make sense, Brad.
Okay.
You can't take any dirt off that road. You would, but
Okay,
my point
okay,
is you don't own the
please,
road.
no back and
But I
forth.
respect his right
Okay, thank
to
you.
use the road.
Yes, okay.
That's all I'm saying.
Again, information is helpful. Susan, did you have other,
No, thank you.
anyone else? Last opportunity here? Okay. Thank you, folks.
So Madam Chair, just on the administrative side, I did mention your next regularly scheduled meeting is June 23rd.
Right.
Your next work session is July 14th. I think based on your discussion, that your intent would be to put this on the July 14th work session. Once we receive correspondence or affirmation from the applicant that they will grant an
Calendar.
extension.
We would like to see a site visit prior to that,
Oh, of course.
you know, and
I
actually,
would
if
think
we,
that's a given.
and if we could do that before the 23rd, that would give ample time for things to sift through and come into consideration.
Before the 14th, you mean?
Well, I
Before
was
July
thinking
14th.
that if we could do it before the 23rd of this month, just to get time for you to have ample time to discuss with your staff members, and we can accommodate and work with them to incorporate some of the concerns that may be derived from the site visit.
Brad Watt, just being sensitive to the 4th of July coming up.
Right.
Per the June 23rd, between now and then, I am wide open.
You mean as the deadline or as a site visit or?
To
I mean, we need
to have you visit the property, Ms.
Yeah,
Mack.
I
So,
think we'll,
and any of the.
staff will be in
board-
touch with board members and we'll figure something out.
Yep, so I would coordinate with legal on what constitutes a quorum of the planning board and what the proper procedures under Rhode Island law are
We used to have
for
site
site
visits all the
visits.
time. It should not be a big deal.
But also the law says if the planning board is walking a site, it's a public meeting, the public can be invited, and then there are issues potentially by the property owner to let the public on their property. So I will coordinate with legal on the best mechanism to get you there as a board or as individuals or smaller groups. So you
And
do
Brad
that.
Watt, again, just to interject, we are open to the general public, so, yeah, anytime.
Thank you. Andy, did you have anything else?
Yeah, I mean, if it's going to be a site visit and you're going to be referring to it at a later time and whatnot, it should be an official meeting. You should have a quorum there. Should have at least 4 members there. There are minimal minutes that need to be kept as far as who's there, what time it opens, the key issues that are looked at, and when it adjourns. The public can attend and follow you around. It's not open for any public comment or anything like that. It's not open for private discussion. If you want to ask the applicant to show you certain things, you know, where would the garages go? That's basically what we're looking for is, you know, where are the various things? Not a whole presentation and proposal and whatnot, but just
Right.
what are we looking at here?
Yeah.
Where are they going to go?
Right, where's the thing that looked like the swimming pool with a waterfall and ferns that you showed us?
So, exactly.
Okay, thank you, Andy. Thank you.
And notice-wise, it's the Open Meeting Act requirements, 48 hours ahead of time for all the posting, et cetera. 48 hours working days.
Thanks, Andy. Let's move on to our next agenda item, Old Tower Hill Road Neighborhood Project, Form-Based Code, review and recommendation to the South Kingstown Town Council. Jamie? Thanks.
Thank you very much.
So, Madam Chair, thank you for the introduction. The form.
Jamie, could we just take a 5-minute bathroom break? Is everybody okay with that?
Sure.
Maria, I think we're all set.
Let's carry on. Jamie?
So Madam Chair, again, thank you. Just as an update to the form-based code, I did do a presentation to the town council on an update in status. I went through 12 to 14 slides. There were some questions on architecture, a little bit of density and form, and I'm just going to go through very quickly. You know, we had some feedback from a council that they didn't like the tower component, although other council members liked kind of the more Middletown architecture, but that's pretty simple to do. You remove the tower. So we could also look at alternatives to the architectural realm. So we went through some things. There's 5 transects or 5 code districts, FB1, FB1, 5, 2, 3, and 4. The planning board members should be very familiar with this. I know Mr. Jordan's new, but he may have been following along. So Paul, if you want to spend an hour with us or a couple hours, we'll sit down and try to bring you up to speed. Again, here are the transect districts. There were a lot of questions of what are the exact boundaries, where do they go, what are the limitations, western, eastern, southern, and northern, and we went through that. We then briefly went through what FB1 represents, FB1, 5, 2, 3, and 4. We then looked at some of the changes we were looking at, which was additional language to clarify compliance thresholds, lawful businesses, standards that apply, scope of compliance, and activities meaning additions, changes of use, renovations to the buildings, what triggers compliance, and we reviewed those. We just briefly showed them some clarifications on the Build 2 form, encroachment lines, and then we just let them know we're trying to bring flexibility to the architectural realm, but also kind of have thematic baselines there. So whether it has gables or shutters or no shutters or flat roofs with thick cornices or slightly smaller cornices, there's a vision to what type of architecture you want. I did also let them know that the planning board has challenged me to not only have some things we like, but specifically have some photographs of buildings that absolutely don't meet the architectural standard of the code, although they may make the density and dimensional requirements. I know I've talked to the planning board about this, that I could have a building that maxes out at 35 feet, it's 3 floors or 2.5. It requires you to have a thick cornice, and then it requires that no more than 30 feet can go in a line or horizontally before you have to bump the building out a foot. Then it can only go 20 feet, then it's got to bump back in. But some savvy attorneys will read that, and they're just shaping the shoebox, pulling things out, pulling things back in. But then they're going to stick metal standing seam or literally texture R11 on the building and then say, we meet the dimensional requirements or your regulations. You talk about architecture, but there's nothing in here that says I can't do that. You've challenged me to show a few pictures of what that represents and to show that that is not acceptable. So I will have those for you in a couple of weeks. Again, these were representative of buildings that would be in FB3 and FB4. These, again, are another variation of a building in FB3 and FB4. A street on FB3, FB4. Just from a code perspective, some of the compliance issues of existing buildings when the standards apply, forward expansions, new constructions, demos, and scope of compliance. Again, no one can read that, but we did take a piece from the existing zoning regulations, and although it's redundant, added it into the form-based code when it discusses demolition, fire, and acts of God, that it's clear in our existing code, if your building burns down and it's an existing non-conforming structure or contains a non-conforming use, you can replace that in kind on that same foundation. There's actually a provision for a slight expansion. If your building burns down or a hurricane wipes it out, that those are act of gods, you can rebuild without having to comply to the code. If you willfully tear your building down, you may have to apply to the code. So, and then there was a question that Councilwoman Alley had about, Jamie, I know historically you've showed us some different variations of architecture. Do you have some of those samples that you could show us tonight? And I just have 5 slides that just show some variations of different types of buildings. These were rendered in some architectural software and then reiterated with AI. So again, it's pretty productive. Just changing the hues and the texture of the buildings, looking at different variations. Here you're looking at mansard roofs, gables, you have some awnings, you have umbrellas and outdoor dining, you have grade separation between the parked car. And in some instances, if you're doing a new street and a redevelopment, people are always concerned about outdoor parking, but you literally have 200 to 2,500 pound bollards parked there. They're not bollards, they're called vehicles. So people are more comfortable sitting in an outdoor dining space when there is a parked parallel car adjacent to the sidewalk versus no car. So in some provisions, we're trying to address that. This is more appropriate landscaping and building form for FB15 and FB2. And again, we were just trying to show scale again, FB3, FB4, if that you were ever to tear down the Wakefield Mall 20, 30, 40, 50 years from now, you're looking at this style and bulk and density for the redevelopment of that project. And again, back to some variations of what a streetscape could look like in an FB3, FB4 scenario. So this wouldn't be Oak Street. This wouldn't be the very southern portion of Main Street. This is more intense development in the Wakefield Mall area or 108 and Old Tower Hill Road proper. And again, those were the additional slides that you may not have seen as a board, but I did show those and share those with the town council last night.
Thanks, Jamie. And board members can go back and listen to last night's presentation. Jamie did an excellent job. Mm-hmm. And I think when you look at these images, you can really visualize the mixed-use concept.
Yeah. And again, we tried to stress that in the form-based code, a lot of the things are aspirational, but they give guidelines to a developer. And Brian can attest to this, and Curtis probably can from his experiences in Pawtucket, and he'll learn those experiences in South Kingstown. Some of the initial discussions with the developer are, I own a piece of property, I'd like to redevelop it, what are the town's expectations? These type of visuals are important to that conversation to reflect the style of development and density that they're looking for. There's nothing in the code that says that couldn't be a 3-story office building, but it does allow for first floor retail, office, and second floor residential. But there's nothing in the code that would prevent that from being all retail and all office. We're just encouraging the residential component where residential isn't allowed in the zone right now. So again, we had that discussion. I think the conversation was positive last night. Again, there were some questions. I've been working with Andy on looking at the legal aspect and making it as user-friendly as we can from Andy's experience on the legal side. So you may see a section that may be on page 74 or 75 as Andy's looking at it and potentially evaluating how someone's going to use this or an attorney's going to use this. He may make some suggestions that some of the language on 74 and 75 get moved up to page 31 in one larger section and two kind of independent sections. So we may have some reformatting of words. We're also going diligently through there to make sure that some of the graphics that are being used in each of the zones don't conflict with graphics later on in a document when they talk about streetscapes. There's one that talks about streetscapes in a 21-foot area, and then when you go to the actual FB1, FB15, 2, 3, and 4, the build 2 zones, encroachment zones are potentially in slight conflict with a small section later on in the document. And again, The one thing, if the council tentatively was going to schedule a public hearing on July 13th, it looks like that may be pushed to August, which will give us additional time to make those revisions and get a cleaner document for the public hearing format.
And you'll let us know when the date for the public hearing
Yes,
is
we will.
determined.
And also, the council has done a formal referral to the planning board. I know the planning board voted to support the form-based code and any reference to them, but we'll have that on your next agenda for your regular session. So you
question.
can make a formal finding and recommendation to them.
Oh, and the other thing is that when all of this is, the formal finding is sent to the council, might it be helpful for us to have a letter or a narrative that explains why we think this is important and how?
I think that would be a good idea, because as I mentioned last night, this isn't something that just happened yesterday, that this is, I think I use the terminology, over an 8-year process. You know, EDC, Affordable Housing, Planning Department, I want to say 4 planning directors, and I'm the 4th, with 2 in interim, and then I came on board in 2020. But this has slowly gained momentum over time, and multiple people have seen this. You had the University of Rhode Island's landscape architectural program involved at one point in time, and I made a statement last night that, you know, a lot of the renderings that the landscape architectural students did, the public was relatively positive on what those elements looked like. I said what was missing in that discussion is, how do you take those pretty pictures that someone sees or perceives, or the photo that's on the screens right now, how do you codify that? And working with our consultant, and I know with my experience in planning over 30 plus years, is that one of the dynamic ways to make this vision come forward is to use a form-based format versus adding architectural standards to a traditional Euclidean zoning thing. This, again, is a better tool to bring this type of development forward.
I just have a quick question, and it's thinking about the Wakefield Mall property, just because it's probably the biggest single property there. You know, I think when you look at these slides, it's the variety of materials and forms that makes it so attractive, the same reason that we like our old Main Street. And of course, you know, the multi-use, residential, the mix. Could somebody take that Wakefield Mall property and do another South County Commons where the buildings have this sort of uniformity of architecture and materials and sort of,
Yeah.
yeah.
So I don't want to say they couldn't, but the form drives them in a different direction. Okay. So the code forms them that any streets that they are putting in there, that the buildings have to be street orientated, that parking has to be behind or to the side, that uses need to be intermingled and mixed within the buildings. So South County Commons is a mixed use property, but there are not a mixed use buildings.
Right.
So I think, you know, similar to places like Mashpee Commons and other developments in Wayland, Mass, and in Plymouth, they have mixed use forms, but they're not truly that mixed use that you would see in a historic turn of the century village or town. This code is trying to bring that type of mixed use so it's more pedestrian friendly and walkable. I would say South County Commons is pedestrian friendly to the visitor who goes there and walks on Main Street and maybe goes to one of the restaurants. But if I live in one of the apartments and I'm going to the movie theater, I may take my car because it's not very pedestrian friendly. And I think planners and urban designers and architects have learned from what's happened in the past and what the examples were that were the best. Mashpee Commons was kind of envisioned in the 80s. It was built in the mid to late 90s. I've analyzed street width at Mashpee Commons. We put cars, perpendicular to the curb there to show the roads are too wide. They could have condensed some things. And Mashpee Commons, until recently, didn't have a residential component. I think within the last 5 or 6 years, they only added a few apartments. Their next phase is apartments, but there's no apartments or residential components above office or retail space there. So it's a faux downtown, and the residential separated from that. That's a mixed-use project, but not traditional mixed use. So I would say stay tuned.
Okay, thanks. Update from staff, general update?
Again, as I mentioned earlier, we're glad to have Curtis on board. I think Lynn made a joke after the first day he came back. Maybe I wasn't supposed to repeat that, but Curtis did come back after his first day, and again, we look forward to working with him and integrating him into our department as a team player.
Great. Update on legal issues, dare I ask?
Nothing to report.
It's not over till it's over?
That's correct. My understanding is there are a lot of bills that haven't moved out of the Senate. I asked, as of last Thursday, there doesn't even appear to be really anything other than extending commissions that's been signed into law. So we don't know what's going to happen.
Yep. Okay, planning board liaison activities? I don't have anything.
Madam Chair, just to put it out there, Joe Murphy was always the liaison to the
Yes, that's the next
affordable
item,
housing.
yeah.
Okay, so we're looking for anybody who might be interested in taking up that role moving forward.
And so perhaps too, so that it's not overly burdensome on whoever volunteers to do this, it shouldn't be required that they go to every meeting. Perhaps it can be when they have something to review, or Jamie, do you have?
Yeah, I know, Madam Chair, we had discussed this earlier in the month. It is a significant commitment of the planning board members to do, in essence, 24 meetings a year, and then potentially tack on another 12. I think one thing that is unique is that our, I can blame my son for that. I don't know what he does to my phone when he's home from college. So I think it's a unique scenario that the boards and commissions you're asking for liaisons to, we also staff. So literally, we could have an update from staff on a monthly basis as to what activities are happening with EDC, affordable housing,
Makes more sense, yeah.
COMCOM/sustainability. But it would be good for a planning board member to at least attend these meetings on a quarterly basis, to have a presence and a face, to also potentially have the discussion at those meetings on a quarterly basis. Hey, I'm on affordable housing today. What's planning board looking from us to do? What are you doing? How can we work closer together? Because sometimes they need to hear it from the other boards and not just from staff, and vice versa. But I think it's a significant commitment, and I think it would be reasonable to have expectation that at a minimum you attend quarterly, or maybe there's a special item if affordable housing is now looking at South Road or Oliver Watson, and it's something that will be coming before the planning board. Maybe we ask that liaison to go to that board earlier so they can be involved in a pertinent discussion from the onset.
So is anyone interested in doing this? Armand? Okay. Thank you, that's awesome.
Thank you.
Affordable housing typically meets the fourth Thursday of the month at 7 o'clock down in the planning department.
So,
Yep.
so quarterly would be,
January, April, August, November type scenario. And again, we can work on how that, what the expectations are, or even Armin's availability to set up a quarterly schedule.
okay. Thank you. Anything else? Oh, can you tell us what our next regular agenda looks like at this point in time, just in?
So for our next regularly scheduled meeting, we do not have any, I'll let Brian, I'm not sure we have anything carrying forward until August, correct, Brian?
Isn't 2001 Kingstown Road coming back?
Sorry.
They were supposed to be here in...
A few have asked
Yeah.
for extensions. I don't have the
okay.
exact dates
All right.
at the top of my head, but it's not 10 applications
Okay.
coming forward.
Just good,
Okay, so 2001 on Kingstone Road, which is the 5-unit development. So, and again, that would be a regularly scheduled meeting, and we would add form-based code to that also.
good, just to give people the heads up and be mentally prepared. All right, would someone like to make a motion to adjourn?
No, before we do that, I volunteered for the TRC tomorrow morning, not looking at my
Oh.
calendar and realizing that
Yes.
oh, you're going to do it. Thank
Yeah,
you.
as
I will,
soon as you
I
let
will
me know, I
absolutely get the next
sent
one.
out All right, so we've already got the next one booked. Motion to adjourn?
I'll make that motion.
Caper, second from Paul. Any further discussion? All those in favor, say aye. Aye. Motion's unanimous. Thank you, everyone.